My billionaire parents offered me a check for $50 million. The catch? I had to walk away from the man I loved and never ever look back. We were in my father's penthouse office, and they sat across from me, looking so sure of themselves. The city lights twinkled below us, and right there on the polished desk was a check that represented an impossible choice. My father called it a generous severance package from a life he didn't approve of. My mother just called it a way back home. What they didn't know was that their ultimatum was about to lead me straight to a family secret they'd buried decades ago. A secret that would make their $50 million look like pocket change and completely change the rules of their game. If you think your family has drama, you might want to stick around for this one. Subscribe for more stories about choosing your own way, and let's get into it. Growing up, a Sinclair was like living in a museum. Everything was beautiful, expensive, and completely untouchable. Our name was carved onto skyscrapers, hospital wings, and university libraries. My parents were titans of industry, but our home was just as cold as the steel their company, Sinclair Industries, produced. Dinners felt more like board meetings. Affection was a transaction, something you earned with good grades, the right friends, and a perfect public image. I was their prized asset, the heir apparent, groomed for a world I respected but didn't actually love. Then I met Liam O'Connell. It was at a charity auction I was running. He wasn't some big donor. He was the artisan who'd restored the main auction piece, a beautiful 19th century desk. While everyone else was busy networking, Liam was quietly explaining the history of the wood grain to an elderly woman no one else was paying attention to. He had a little sawdust in his hair, a real kindness in his eyes, and hands that told you he built things, not just bought them. He was a carpenter. My parents' world was all about demolition and acquisition. His was about restoration and care. He had no idea who I was when we first started talking, and for the first time in my life, that felt like a gift. With him, I wasn't Elara Sinclair, the heiress. I was just Elara. Our first dates weren't at fancy restaurants. They were long walks in the park and trips to dusty antique shops. He showed me that an object's value has nothing to do with its price tag. It was in the laughter we shared when I tried to cook and burnt dinner, in the comfortable silence as we read books side by side in his tiny apartment, and in the way he looked at me, like he actually saw me, not the dynasty I represented. I was falling in love, and it finally felt real. It felt like my own. I knew introducing Liam to my parents would be tough. I just didn't realize it would be a declaration of war. I brought him to the mandatory Sunday dinner at the Sinclair estate. The second he walked through the door, my mother's smile tightened into a brittle line. My father shook his hand with all the enthusiasm of someone signing a tax return. The dinner was just an interrogation in disguise. "O'Connell," my father began, swirling his wine. "What is it you do exactly?" "I'm a carpenter, sir. I specialize in custom furniture and historical restoration," Liam said, his voice completely steady. My father just raised an eyebrow. "A trade? How quaint? And what are your long-term prospects with that?" Before Liam could even answer, my mother jumped in, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Elara has a certain future, Liam. A legacy to uphold. Our circle is, well, it's particular. I'm sure you understand." Liam looked at her, then he looked at me and said calmly, "I understand that I love your daughter, and her happiness is my only long-term prospect." The silence that followed was so loud. After that night, a cold war began. My allowance, which I used to manage my charities, was suddenly under review. My mother started calling with lunch dates she'd set up for me with sons of her friends, all of them safe, boring finance bros. My father would email me articles about marrying within your social class, with the subject line, "Food for Thought." It all came to a head when I refused to go to a gala because they had explicitly uninvited Liam. "This is not a negotiation, Elara." My father's voice was like ice over the phone. "This is about protecting this family, protecting your future. He is a distraction you cannot afford. He's the best thing that's ever happened to me, I yelled back, my voice shaking with a rage I never showed them. Then you are a bigger fool than I thought, he said, and the line went dead. A week later, I was summoned to his office, and that's when they made me the offer. $50 million to just disappear from Liam's life. Think of it as a golden parachute back to reality, my father said, nodding at the check. You can travel, start a business, anything you want. You just have to do it without him. I looked at their faces, so certain, so convinced that everyone and everything has a price. And in that moment, all I felt for them was pity. They had all the money in the world, but didn't have a clue about real value. No, I said. It was just a quiet little word, but it echoed in that huge office like a gunshot. What did you just say? My mother asked, her voice sharp. I said no, you can keep your money. I stood up. My legs were shaking, but my voice was firm. In fact, you can keep all of it. The inheritance, the legacy, all of it. I choose him. My father's face went hard. You are throwing away everything. No, I said, looking him right in the eye. I'm finally choosing something. I walked out of that office, and I didn't look back. That night, I went home to Liam's little apartment with just the clothes on my back and this feeling of terrifying, thrilling freedom. He just held me as I cried, not for the money I'd lost, but for the family I never really had. Life got simple. I got a job at an art gallery. We struggled, we laughed, and we built a life that was small but solid, like the furniture Liam made. About 6 months after I was officially disowned, a letter showed up from my late grandmother's estate lawyer. My grandmother, my dad's mom, and the only warm person in the Sinclair family, had left a personal box for me. Her instructions said I was to get it on my 30th birthday, or, as the letter put it, at a time of great personal crossroads. I figured getting disowned counted. The box was old and smelled like cedar. Inside were faded photos, her diary, and at the very bottom, a thick envelope sealed with wax, addressed to me in my father's handwriting. My blood ran cold. Why was a letter from him in here? First, I opened my grandmother's diary. Her last entry was about me. I see the same storm gathering for my Alara that gathered for her father. My husband broke our son, forced him to choose between the woman he loved and this cold empire. Richard chose the empire, and I have watched the light in his eyes dim ever since. I pray Alara is stronger. I pray she chooses love. I have told Richard that if she does, he must give her this box. It is his only chance to save his daughter, and maybe his own soul. My hands were trembling as I opened the sealed letter from my father. It began with one line. If you are reading this, my daughter, it means you have passed. The letter went on, his perfect script shaking for the first time I'd ever seen. He wrote that the $50 million offer was a test. A cruel one, he admitted, but the only one he knew how to give. He wrote about a woman he had loved before my mother, a librarian his own father had deemed unsuitable. He was given the same choice, a fortune or a woman. He chose the fortune and had spent 30 years regretting it. I was a coward, he wrote. I couldn't let you be one too. I had to know if you had the strength I lacked, the strength to choose something real. By saying no to that check, you didn't lose an inheritance. You earned it. You earned all of it. This was my test, Alara, and you are the Sinclair I always wished I could have been. The floor just dropped out from under me. The cold, calculating man who'd tried to buy my happiness was a prisoner of his own life. The ultimatum wasn't an attack. It was a desperate prayer. Liam held my hand the entire way back to the city. He was stunned, but he understood. He saw the broken man behind the monster. I didn't call a lawyer. I called my father's private line. I need to see you and Mother, I said. Your office. 1 hour. Come alone. When I walked in, they had the same arrogant, tired looks on their faces. My mother looked at me with disdain, as if I were something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. If you've come back for a handout, Alara, the offer has expired, she said coldly. My father, however, was silent. He just watched me. He saw I wasn't broken or begging. I was different. I didn't say a word. I just walked to his desk and laid down the letter. His letter. My mother scoffed. What is that? My father didn't look at her. His eyes were locked on mine. He saw the letter, and for the first time in my life, the iron mask of Richard Sinclair shattered. His face crumpled. His shoulders, which had always seemed to hold up the entire city skyline, finally slumped. She knows, he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion I had never heard from him before. Regret. Knows what? My mother demanded, snatching the letter from the desk. Her eyes scanned the page, and her face went from confusion to pure, unadulterated fury. A test? A test? You were willing to risk everything for this? This sentimental nonsense? She glared at him, then at me. You have ruined this family. No, Mother, I said, my voice quiet but firm. He saved it. I walked around the desk to my father, who was now sitting, his head in his hands. He looked up at me, and his eyes were full of tears. I was so afraid, he choked out. Afraid you'd make my choice. I didn't, I said softly. I chose love, just like you hoped I would. In that moment, he wasn't a titan of industry. He was just my dad, and he was finally free. There were no lawyers, no negotiations. My mother left the room, unable to accept a world where love was worth more than a legacy. Her walking away was a wound that may never heal, a bitter reminder that not all broken things can be perfectly fixed. But my father and I stayed. We talked for hours. For the first time, really. He told me about the woman he'd lost, and I told him about the man I'd found. He didn't step down as CEO the next day. There was no grand public gesture. Instead, he made a quiet private one. He asked me to come back, not as the heir who would follow his path, but as a partner who would help him forge a new one. He started showing up at the small art gallery where I worked, not as a titan of industry, but just as a dad, trying to understand my world. Together, we started the foundation my grandmother would have wanted, investing in artisans like Liam. It wasn't a new division of Sinclair Industries. It was something separate, something that was ours. Liam didn't become an executive. He became its heart, guiding it with the same care he uses to restore a piece of history. My father is still the CEO, but he's different. Sometimes I see him watching me and Liam, and there's a look in his eyes, a mix of pride and a deep, quiet sadness for the years he lost and the choice he never made. Our relationship isn't perfect. It's scarred by the past, but we are finally building something real. My parents offered me $50 million to leave the man I loved. In the end, I didn't get the fairy tale where the princess gets the kingdom overnight. I got something more precious. I got a father back from the prison he'd built for himself. My real inheritance wasn't the company. It was the chance to heal a generational wound and to build a new Sinclair legacy, one that isn't built on what you can buy, but on what you have the strength to choose. So, what would you have done? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe that some things just aren't for sale, don't forget to subscribe for more.